Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I'm 32 years old, and I've lived my entire life in the same small town where I was born. My dad moved here from Morocco in the 80s, met my mom who's about as white as they come, and they had me. Teachers would call attendance on the first day of school, mispronounce my last name terribly, and then look shocked when this pale kid with light brown hair raised his hand. I got used to it pretty quick. I've always been a big guy, not tall, just big. By the time I hit my late 20s, I was what doctors politely call morbidly obese. I knew it wasn't healthy, but changing your entire lifestyle is hard when you work long hours at a warehouse and come home exhausted every night. Food was comfort, and comfort was what I needed. Then 2020 happened. The whole world shut down. I got furloughed from my job for 3 months, stayed home, and honestly, I ate even more. By the time 2021 rolled around and they announced the vaccine, I was even heavier than before. The one silver lining was that my weight put me on the priority list for the first dose. High risk category. At least my obesity was good for something, right? The vaccination site was set up at our local community center, the same place where they used to hold bingo nights before everything closed down. I arrived on a Tuesday morning with my mask on, my ID in one hand, and my social security card in the other. The lobby was mostly empty, just a few chairs spread out for social distancing and some staff members checking people in. I sat down and waited. The staff working that day were a mix of people, some white, some clearly from other backgrounds. I noticed one woman who might have been Middle Eastern, another guy who looked maybe African or Caribbean. Didn't matter to me. They were doing their jobs, and I was grateful for it. Then he sat down next to me. The smell hit me first, that sharp, unmistakable scent of alcohol. It was barely 10 in the morning. The guy was probably in his 50s, wearing a wrinkled jacket and jeans that had seen better days. His face was red, his eyes glassy, and he was swaying slightly, even while sitting down. He started talking, not to me specifically at first, just muttering to himself. Then it got louder. He went on a rant about how we weren't in our country anymore. He complained about all these people around us, calling them sons of Arabs and African plebs. He said you couldn't trust anyone these days. I stiffened in my chair. One of the staff members looked over, clearly having heard him, but they didn't say anything. I kept my eyes forward, hoping he'd just shut up or pass out. He didn't. Instead, he suddenly threw his arm around my shoulder, pulling me toward him. The whole room started spinning from his aggressive shaking. He told me it was just the two of us against the world. He said we needed to stay strong and stick together, or else we'd get replaced too. He asked if I knew what he was saying, that we had to have each other's backs. I tried to pull away, but his grip was surprisingly strong for someone so drunk. The shaking got worse, and suddenly my ID card slipped from my fingers and clattered onto the floor. He told me he had me covered and that he'd get it for me. He bent down, nearly falling over, and scooped up my ID. Then he held it close to his face, squinting at it. I watched his expression change in real time. His eyes widened. His mouth opened slightly. He looked from the card to me, then back to the card, then back to me again. He was reading my last name, my very, very Arabic last name. For a few seconds, he just stood there frozen, like his brain was trying to process information it couldn't possibly compute. This white-looking guy he'd just claimed as his brother in arms against the replacement had a name that completely contradicted everything he'd assumed. Just then a nurse appeared from the hallway. She called out my full name, that beautiful Arabic surname echoing through the quiet lobby. I stood up and reached for my ID. I told him I'd take that back now. He handed it over mechanically, still staring at me like I'd just revealed I was an alien. I turned toward the vaccination room, feeling multiple pairs of eyes on me, including those of the staff members who'd witnessed this whole bizarre interaction. I was almost through the door when he finally found his voice. He screamed that I betrayed him. Actually screamed it. Like I'd stabbed him in the back after years of friendship. Like I was some kind of undercover agent who'd infiltrated his racist fantasy world. The nurse jumped slightly and I heard one of the staff members start walking toward him. He yelled that I'd let him think I was one of them. He shouted that I'd lied to him. I paused in the doorway and looked back at him. He was standing now, swaying on his feet, pointing at me with a shaky finger. His face had gone from red to purple. I told him I hadn't lied about anything. I said he'd just made assumptions. Then I walked into the vaccination room and let the door close behind me. The nurse looked at me with a mixture of concern and barely suppressed amusement. She apologized for what happened and asked if I was okay. I said yeah, I was fine. It was just weird. She told me they were going to have security escort him out. She said that kind of behavior wasn't acceptable there. I sat down in the chair and rolled up my sleeve. Through the door I could hear raised voices and someone, probably security, telling the drunk guy he needed to leave. He was still yelling something about betrayal and infiltrators. The nurse prepared the shot and gave me a sympathetic smile. She said that at least I'd have a good story to tell. She stuck the needle in my arm and I barely felt it. I was too busy replaying the whole scene in my head. The look on his face when he read my name. The genuine hurt in his voice when he screamed about betrayal. I left through the side exit 20 minutes later and saw him being led to a police car in the parking lot. He was still yelling, though I couldn't make out the words anymore. I got in my car and drove home feeling like the world's most unlikely spy. I've been best friends with her since college. We met in a chemistry lab when she accidentally knocked over my beaker and spent the next hour helping me redo the entire experiment. That's just who she is, always trying to make things right. She married her husband about 9 years ago, and I was her maid of honor. He seemed like a good guy back then, attentive and caring. They started having kids pretty quickly after that, and now they have 4 daughters, ages 8, 6, 4, and 3. Over the years I noticed something. Her husband was great with the kids when she was around. He'd play with them, make them laugh, help with homework. But the few times I'd been there when she had to step out, even just to run to the store, things got chaotic fast. He'd look lost, like someone had dropped him in a foreign country without a map. The kids would ask for snacks and he'd stand in the pantry for 5 minutes trying to figure out what they were allowed to have. I always brushed it off, thinking maybe he just needed more practice. A few weeks ago she texted me saying she was feeling really sick. She mentioned she'd been throwing up all day and could barely keep her eyes open. I immediately offered to bring dinner over so she wouldn't have to worry about feeding everyone. When I got there around 6 in the evening, she looked terrible. Her face was pale and sweaty, and she kept wrapping herself in a blanket even though the house felt warm. We all sat down to eat the pasta I'd brought. The kids were chattering away about their day, and her husband was helping the youngest cut her food. Everything seemed relatively normal until she suddenly got up and rushed to the bathroom. The 3-year-old jumped down from her chair and ran after her. The youngest came running back seconds later, yelling that her mom was throwing up. All 3 other kids immediately abandoned their dinner and ran toward the bathroom. Her husband and I followed. When I got there, she was hunched over the toilet, looking absolutely miserable. The kids were crowding around the doorway trying to see what was happening. I told them we needed to give their mom some space and gently ushered them back a bit, while her husband stood there looking panicked. I helped her sit back against the wall and grabbed a washcloth to wipe her face. I asked him to get her nausea medicine and a thermometer. He nodded and disappeared. The kids kept trying to push past me to get to their mom. The 8-year-old asked me if her mommy was okay. I told her that her mom was going to be fine and just needed some rest. When he came back with the medicine and thermometer, I asked him to take the kids out of the bathroom so she could have some air. He agreed and herded them out. I took her temperature, and when it read 103.8 degrees, my stomach dropped. I hurried out to get Tylenol and water from the kitchen. When I came back less than 2 minutes later, all 4 kids were back in the bathroom, crowding around their mother. He explained that they wanted to see if she was feeling better. I didn't say anything, just handed her the Tylenol and water. She tried to swallow the pills, but immediately started vomiting again. Then her eyes rolled back and she slumped against the wall, unconscious. I yelled at him to call 911 while I tried to turn her on her side and simultaneously move the kids away. The youngest started crying. Her husband just stood frozen in the doorway. I shouted at him again to call right now. He finally pulled out his phone. I managed to get the kids out into the hallway and checked her breathing. It was shallow but steady. Within seconds, her husband was back asking if he should call the nanny and if I could go to the hospital with her. He said he didn't know what to do with the kids. I told him the ambulance was coming and to just focus on his daughters right now. I could hear the sirens approaching. She started coming to, groaning and trying to sit up. Her husband immediately started asking her what he should do for bedtime, whether she'd washed their pajamas, if they'd gotten screen time that day, and if he could put on a movie. I told him she couldn't hold his hand right now and that he needed to figure it out. He said he wasn't usually the one who dealt with this stuff and that he was trying his best. Then he started asking what stories the kids liked, what setting the sound machine went on, and how they liked their milk. Something in me snapped. I told him to figure it out on his own and called him a useless piece of crap. I asked him how he could be asking about bedtime stories when his wife was going to the hospital. He looked shocked, but I didn't care. The paramedics arrived and took over. They got her stabilized and loaded into the ambulance. I offered to stay with the kids while he went to the hospital, but he said the nanny could come over. I left after the nanny arrived feeling angry and exhausted. My friend ended up having a severe case of the flu that required 2 days in the hospital for dehydration and monitoring. I visited her there, and she thanked me for everything I'd done. When she came home, I stopped by a few times to check on her. Every single time her husband would barely acknowledge me. He'd give me cold looks and find reasons to leave the room. The kids would run up to hug me, but he'd stay distant. My boyfriend heard about what happened and told me I was too harsh. He said her husband was clearly overwhelmed and doing his best. But I kept thinking about how she manages all 4 kids by herself constantly, even when she's exhausted or sick, and he couldn't handle them for even a few minutes during an actual emergency. Last week, I was over helping her fold laundry when he came home from work early. He walked right past me without saying hello. My friend mentioned that he was still upset about what I said and that he'd get over it eventually. But watching him sulk around his own house, acting like the victim when his wife almost died while he panicked about sippy cups, I realized I wasn't sorry at all. I'm a bus driver. That morning started normal enough. I'd been on the Route 47 for 3 years, knew every stop by heart. Had my regulars too, the old guy who always sat behind me and talked about baseball, the college kids with their headphones, the office workers glued to their phones. It was a decent gig, honestly. That day I picked up this woman at the downtown terminal around 8:30 a.m. She was probably in her 50s, wearing one of those velour tracksuits and carrying this massive purse that looked like it could stop a bullet. She got on without saying a word, didn't make eye contact, just swiped her card and sat down about 3 rows back. Everything was fine for the first 20 minutes. I made my stops, let people on and off. Then we got to Maple Street and 5th Avenue. Now this intersection is tricky because there are 2 stops really close together. One right at the corner and another one about 15 feet down after you pass the light. The request light dinged for the first stop. I pulled up to the corner stop like I always do, opened the doors, and 3 people got off. I was just about to close the doors when I heard this voice from behind me. The woman in the tracksuit demanded to know why I stopped there, saying loudly that it wasn't her stop. I looked in my mirror and explained that someone had requested this stop. She snapped back that she hadn't requested it and that her stop was the next one. I told her no problem, that it was right up ahead. I closed the doors and drove forward. Now, here's the thing. We're talking maybe 10, 15 feet maximum. The next stop sign was literally visible from where we were. I pulled up to it, came to a complete stop, and opened the doors. She immediately started yelling, asking if I was kidding her right now. I tried to explain that this was the stop she had requested. She shouted back that this was not her stop and that I had passed it. I was confused now. I looked at my stop list, looked at the sign right outside. I pointed out that this was Maple and 5th, the second stop, and that this was where she had indicated she needed to get off. She insisted that she needed the first stop and accused me of driving right past it. I reminded her that someone else had requested that stop and that she herself had said that wasn't hers. She flat out denied ever saying such a thing. At this point, other passengers were starting to look uncomfortable. One elderly lady near the front was clutching her bag nervously. I apologized for any confusion and explained that she could exit here, noting that it was the same intersection, just 15 feet from the previous stop. She cut me off, asking incredulously if I understood how far 15 feet was. She went on about having a bad hip and how hard it was for her to walk. I told her I was very sorry, but that I couldn't back the bus up because it was against policy and dangerous. I offered that she was welcome to exit here, or I could let her off at the next stop and she could walk back. She declared this completely unacceptable and demanded my badge number, saying she was going to report me. I told her that was her right and pointed to where my operator number was displayed on the panel. I was trying to stay calm, professional. In 7 years, I'd dealt with angry passengers before. You just stay polite, don't engage, let them vent and move on. But then she stood up, and that's when I saw her reach into that massive purse of hers. For a split second, I thought maybe she was getting her phone to take a picture of my ID number. I'd seen that before, but instead she pulled the whole purse up, and before I could even process what was happening, she swung it at my head. The impact was immediate and hard. Whatever she had in that thing, and it must have been a lot, it felt like getting hit with a sack of bricks. My vision went blurry for a second, and I felt the sharp pain radiate from the back of my skull down my neck. I shouted in shock and pain, turning around, with one hand going to my head. She was raising the purse again. She screamed that maybe this would teach me to listen when someone tells me where their stop is. The other passengers started shouting. One guy jumped up from his seat and yelled at her, asking what was wrong with her. She told him to stay out of it, and that I deserved what I got. She was winding up to hit me again when I heard the most beautiful sound, a police siren. I'd gotten lucky. There was a patrol car literally right behind us at the light, and they'd seen the whole thing through the bus windows. 2 officers boarded the bus within seconds. The first officer ordered her to put the purse down. She claimed that I had assaulted her first and that I had refused to let her off at her stop. The second officer said that they had seen her hit me and repeated the order to put the purse down. She shouted that she was a paying passenger and that she had rights. The first officer gave her one last warning. She looked at the cops, looked at me, and then, I still can't believe she did this. She swung the purse at the first officer. He dodged it barely, and then both cops moved in. She started screaming, thrashing around, trying to hit them with that damn purse while they attempted to cuff her. It took both officers and about 3 minutes to finally get her restrained. She fought the entire time, yelling about lawsuits and police brutality and how she was going to have everyone's jobs. One of the officers asked me if I was all right and whether I needed medical attention. I told him I thought I did, that my head was killing me. They called an ambulance. Turned out I had a mild concussion. They found 4 hardcover library books, a laptop, and 2 full water bottles in her purse. No wonder it hit like a freight train. The woman got charged with assault, resisting arrest, and assaulting an officer. I had to take a week off work, but the company backed me up completely. Several passengers gave statements, and the bus camera caught everything. I heard through my supervisor that she tried to sue the transit company, claiming I provoked her by deliberately missing her stop. The lawsuit got thrown out immediately once they saw the video footage showing the 2 stops were 15 feet apart. I still drive Route 47, still make those same stops at Maple and 5th, but now I'm a lot more careful about watching passengers in my mirror, and I definitely keep an eye out for anyone carrying an oversized purse. I met my ex about 2.5 years ago at a mutual friend's party. He seemed nice enough at first, kinda quiet but thoughtful. We started dating pretty casually, nothing too serious in the beginning. He had a decent job in finance, and I was working at a marketing firm. Things progressed naturally, and before I knew it, we were in a committed relationship. He always kept track of things in this weird way, like he'd mention how much he spent on dinner, or remind me that he paid for our weekend trip 6 months ago. I brushed it off as him just being organized or maybe a little anxious about money. I figured everyone has their quirks, right? We had our good moments, don't get me wrong. We'd binge watch shows together, go hiking on weekends, and he'd surprise me with little gifts here and there, a coffee mug with a funny quote, flowers on random Wednesdays, a pair of sneakers for Christmas because I'd mentioned mine were falling apart, normal relationship stuff. But over time, things started feeling off. He became more controlling about how I spent my time. He'd get upset if I made plans with friends without telling him first. He started questioning why I needed to go out for coffee with coworkers or why I was spending money on things he thought were unnecessary. The spark just faded, and we both knew it. So about 3 weeks ago, we sat down and decided to end things. It was quiet, civil even. No big fight, no drama. Just two people realizing it wasn't working anymore. I thought we were both mature adults handling a breakup the right way. I was wrong. Yesterday, I got an email from him. The subject line just said items. I opened it expecting maybe he wanted to coordinate picking up some stuff he'd left at my place. Instead, I found an Excel spreadsheet attached. I opened the file and just stared at my screen for a solid minute. It was a detailed list of every single gift he'd ever given me during our relationship. And I mean everything. The Christmas sneakers, valued at $95. A necklace from my birthday last year, listed at $120. Flowers he bought me on Valentine's Day, with the exact price of $45. That coffee mug I mentioned earlier, $12. Even a book he gave me for no reason back in the first year we dated, $22. A scarf he bought me when we went on a trip together, $38. The list went on and on. Next to each item was the original price, the date he gave it to me, and something he labeled current fair market value. For some items, he'd reduced the value to account for wear and tear. The sneakers were now worth $60 according to him. The coffee mug, still in perfect condition, remained at $12. At the bottom of the spreadsheet, he'd added up the total. It came to over $1,500. The email itself was short. He wrote that he had attached a comprehensive list of all gifts purchased for me during our relationship. He said he'd like these items returned, or he could accept payment for their current fair market value as listed. He asked me to let him know how I'd like to proceed within 48 hours. I read it 3 times. Then I left. I laughed out loud in my apartment because what I was seeing was completely ridiculous. This had to be a joke, but then my phone buzzed with a follow-up text. He asked if I'd gotten his email. I texted back saying, yeah, I got it, and asked if he was serious. He replied that he was completely serious. He explained that he had invested in me, and when that investment didn't pay off, he wanted his assets back. I stared at those words, invested in me, like I was some kind of stock portfolio that underperformed. I responded that he had to be kidding me. I told him those were gifts and that's not how gifts work. He argued back that they were conditional on our relationship continuing. He said since I was the one who wanted to end things, it was only fair I return them or compensate him. I shot back that I didn't want to end things. I reminded him that we decided together it wasn't working. He replied that either way, he expected those items back. He said I was essentially stealing from him by keeping them. He specifically mentioned those Christmas sneakers, saying he spent good money on those. That's when I remembered something. I asked him if he meant the same way he was stealing from me. I brought up my AirPods, the ones he borrowed 8 months ago and lost. Those were worth $169 when I bought them. There was silence for a few minutes. Finally, he texted back saying that was an accident. I replied asking where those were on his spreadsheet. I pointed out they cost more than half the stuff on his list. He said that was different. I asked how exactly it was different. He explained that he didn't intentionally keep them. He accused me of intentionally keeping his gifts. The mental gymnastics he was doing were unbelievable. I decided to scroll through the spreadsheet again more carefully. That's when I noticed he'd included things that weren't even gifts. A pizza he'd ordered for us to share one night, $28. He listed it as a gift to me. A movie ticket from when we went to see something I wanted to watch, $15. Apparently, that counted too. Even a bottle of wine he brought to my place once, $32. He was trying to charge me for things we'd shared together during our relationship. I texted him asking if he was seriously trying to charge me for a pizza we ate together. He replied that he was the one who paid for it, so yes. I asked about all the times I'd cooked dinner for him. I asked if he wanted me to calculate the cost of groceries and my time. He said that was different because I offered to cook. I reminded him that he offered to buy the pizza too. He ignored that and sent another text saying he expected a response about the items by tomorrow evening. I told him flat out that I wasn't giving him anything back. I explained that those were gifts, given freely during a relationship. I said he didn't get to demand them back because things didn't work out. And honestly, I added, if we were keeping score, he owed me 2 years of my life I'd never get back. Not to mention the countless hours I spent listening to him complain about work, or the times I drove him to the airport at 5 in the morning, or when I helped him move into his new apartment and spent an entire weekend unpacking boxes. I asked if he wanted to put a fair market value on all of that. My phone rang immediately. I declined the call. He called again. I declined again. Then the texts started flooding in. He accused me of theft. He threatened to take legal action if necessary. He called me completely unreasonable. He insisted all he was asking for was what was rightfully his. He repeated that I was robbing him. He sent a text saying he'd already talked to a lawyer friend who agreed with him. I seriously doubted that was true. I typed out one final response telling him I wasn't giving him anything and to lose my number. I also mentioned that if he wanted to take me to court over some used sneakers and a coffee mug, he should go right ahead. I told him any judge would laugh him out of the courtroom. Within seconds, I got a notification that I'd been blocked on everything: social media, messaging apps, his phone number, complete radio silence. I sat there for a while, still holding my phone, still processing the absolute audacity of what just happened. The guy I spent 2 years with, who I supported through a job loss, who I nursed back to health when he had the flu, who I thought I knew, had just reduced our entire relationship to a financial transaction gone bad. I looked around my apartment at the few things he'd given me. The mug was in my kitchen cabinet. The sneakers were by my door. The necklace was in my jewelry box. The scarf was hanging in my closet. Each one now felt tainted somehow, but I wasn't about to let him win. Later that evening, my best friend came over and I showed her the spreadsheet. She started laughing so hard she nearly cried. She pointed out that he'd listed a birthday card at $4.50, a card that he'd probably written 2 sentences in. She joked that I should send him a counter spreadsheet. She suggested listing out every meal I cooked, every time I was his therapist, every hour of emotional labor. She said I should calculate the cost of my time at a therapist's rate, which would be around $150 per hour. She pulled out her phone and started doing the math. If I spent just 2 hours a week listening to his problems, that was over $300 weekly. Over 2 years, that would be over $30,000. We both started laughing at how absurd it all was. But honestly, blocking me was the best gift he could have given me. Now I never have to deal with him again. And I'm definitely keeping the sneakers. A few days later, I got a message from the mutual friend who introduced us. She said my ex had been complaining to people about how I stole from him. She wanted to know what actually happened. I sent her the spreadsheet. She responded with 3 laughing emojis and said she'd make sure everyone knew the truth. Apparently, he's not getting much sympathy from our friend group. I grew up in a house with 3 brothers, a baby sister, and parents who tried their best to keep the peace. With that many kids running around, food disappeared fast. My mom had this one rule she was super serious about. If you opened anything, chips, cookies, crackers, whatever, you had to share with everyone in the house. No exceptions. At first, I thought it was fair. Nobody could hoard the good snacks, and everyone got a taste of whatever was opened. But after living with 3 brothers who could devour an entire box of anything in under 5 minutes, I started to realize this rule was working against me more than it was helping. My brothers were like vacuum cleaners. You'd open a bag of chips, offer them some, and suddenly half the bag would be gone before you even got your second handful. They didn't just take a portion, they took the most they could grab. And my mom would just shrug and say, that's what sharing meant. One afternoon I was craving cookies. We had this big family pack sitting in the pantry, the kind with the chocolate chip ones that were actually good. I've been thinking about them all day at school, but the second I thought about opening that package, I knew what would happen. My brothers would swarm me like locusts. I'd be lucky to get 3 cookies out of the whole pack. I sat there staring at the pantry, trying to figure out a way around this. I couldn't just sneak them. Someone always noticed. And if I got caught breaking the rule, my mom would give me that look, and I'd lose snack privileges for a week. But then it hit me. The rule said I had to share with everyone in the house. It didn't say how much I had to share. I grabbed the family pack and ripped it open. Then I started walking around the house. My oldest brother was in the living room playing video games. I walked up to him and handed him 1 cookie. Just 1? He looked at me confused and asked what was going on, why he only got 1 cookie. I told him Mom said I had to share, and I was sharing. He tried to argue, but I was already walking away. I went to the kitchen where my middle brother was making a sandwich. I placed 1 cookie on the counter next to him and told him it was for him. He immediately reached for the bag and asked me to give him a few more. I refused and told him he already got his share. I moved on before he could grab the bag from me. My youngest brother was in his room doing homework. I walked in and put a cookie on his desk. He looked up at me and asked why I was being weird. I just told him I was following the rules and left before he could say anything else. Then I went to my parents. My dad was reading the newspaper in his chair. I gave him 1 cookie. He raised an eyebrow but took it without saying much. My mom was folding laundry in her room. I walked in and handed her a cookie, telling her it was her share. She looked at me suspiciously and asked what I was up to. I told her I wasn't up to anything, just sharing like she always said. She looked like she didn't believe me, but I didn't give her time to question it further. I went to the high chair where my baby sister was sitting and placed 1 cookie on her tray. She immediately grabbed it with her tiny hands and started gumming it, drool going everywhere. But I wasn't done yet. I walked out the back door into the yard. Our neighbor was out there mowing his lawn like he did every Saturday. I walked right up to the fence and called out to him, asking if he wanted a cookie. He looked confused but said sure and came over to take it. I think he thought I was just being a nice kid from next door. Then I went back inside and found our dog sleeping in the hallway. I broke off a piece of a cookie and gave it to him. He woke up, sniffed it for a second, and ate it in 1 bite before going back to sleep. Now, technically, everyone in the house had been given a share. Even the neighbor who was close enough to count, and the dog who was definitely part of the family. I'd followed the rule exactly like it was stated. I went to my room, closed the door, and sat on my bed with the rest of the pack. There were still at least 20 cookies left. I ate them slowly, savoring every single bite. No brothers grabbing handfuls, no one hovering over me asking for more. Just me and my cookies, in perfect peace. About 10 minutes later, my mom knocked on my door and asked if she could come in. I told her yeah, and she opened the door. She saw me sitting there with a half-empty package in my lap. She stood there for a second, clearly trying to figure out what to say. She pointed out that I'd given everyone 1 cookie, just 1. I confirmed that yes, I had. She said it again, like she was trying to process it. I reminded her that she'd said I had to share, and I had shared with everyone. She said I'd given each person 1 single cookie. I pointed out that she never said how much I had to share, just that I had to share with everyone in the house. She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her trying not to smile. She crossed her arms and asked if I'd really given 1 to the neighbor too. I said yes, and the dog too. She shook her head slowly and let out a long sigh, then told me she couldn't even argue with what I'd done. She turned and left my room. I heard her laughing in the hallway when she walked away. My brothers were furious when they realized what had happened. They tried to complain to my mom, but she told them I technically followed the rule exactly like she'd stated it. There was nothing they could do about it. From that day on, my brothers tried to pull the same trick whenever they opened something, but my mom had wised up by then. She added a new part to the rule about sharing a reasonable amount with everyone. But it was too late. I'd already won. I got my cookies, and I didn't have to watch them disappear in seconds like they usually did. Even now, whenever we all get together for holidays or family dinners, someone brings up the cookie incident. My brothers still act annoyed when it comes up, but they laugh about it too. My mom says it was the day she realized I was going to end up being a lawyer or a politician someday. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.